Welcome back everyone to Gacha Interact. Today we're going to be looking at the second half of the 2.3 star rail banners today. First character we're going to be taking a look at is Jade, and the second character we're looking at is Argenti. Let's go through both of these banners and see whether or not these characters are a good pulling option for you. And if you do enjoy the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe and check out the rest of our channel for other videos you may be interested in. We do also have a Discord you can join where our members talk with each other and we have a lot of fun in there. Now, on to the video.
So the first character we want to jump into is talking about Jade, and then we'll go into Argenti. Now, specifically talking about Jade, we did already have a pre-release actually not too long ago talking about her. So if you guys do want to know a little bit more in depth about her kit and our kind of thoughts on that, you can go to this video. But I still will be talking about the actual kit and the character in Jade. It'll probably just be a little bit quicker. In an overall basis, both of these characters are going to be erudition characters, and with Jade being a quantum erudition character, it's just kind of something different and new that we can have as a 5-star character. Now, looking at her first and foremost, like other IPC characters, she kind of focuses on doing most of her damage in a follow-up attack instance. Now, this is also focused in actually getting stacks to actually allow this follow-up attack to happen. With her skill, she can actually make another character or herself a debt collector, and while doing so, she'll deal an extra instance of damage when they attack as quantum damage on top of their normal hit. But at the same time, it will be taking away some HP, which could be good for actually some other characters in the game. At the same time, she'll be increasing their speed as well, but if Jade is the debt collector, she won't get any of these effects, good or bad. Looking at her ult though, she has an AoE attack, and with her talents as well, it's multiple AoE attacks. So a lot of this, once again, following very much in form to actually looking at erudition characters, hitting multiple targets at once. So with Jade, she's not only just increasing a lot of personal attack as well as crit damage, but she's also helping some other teammates do some extra things as well. She's mainly using them to help herself do more damage by making them a debt collector or kind of forcing herself to do it in place of them. Looking at Argenti, the other side of the banner, looking at his kit in a kind of a broad sense, because we actually haven't made anything over him and talked about him yet. So Rift, I know he is also a physical erudition character, and he's already had his run before, so this is a rerun for him. But all in all, what do his skills actually do?
Right, so jumping into Argenti, the one thing I love about Argenti's kit is it's very, very simple and very easy to understand. At his basic attack, we just deal some physical damage equal to about 80% of Argenti's attack, assuming this is skill level 4. And with his skill, he deals physical damage equal to 105% of his attack to all enemies. So this isn't just limited to like one enemy and then the 2 adjacent left and right, it's all enemies. If there are 5 enemies, you're hitting them all. And this is, once again, 105% of his attack, assuming this is skill level 8. His ultimate just consumes 90 energy and deals physical damage equal to 144% of Argenti's attack to all enemies. Now, here's the caveat and the kind of cool part with Argenti. He actually technically has 2 charges of his ultimate. You can let it regenerate up to 1 use, and then it will actually keep regenerating up to its full potential and deals a lot more damage once it gets there. It's kind of like how you can have in certain parts of simulated universe, you can get certain blessings that allow your path resonance to charge up twice and it deals more damage. It's very much like that. And in a lot of situations, you do want to let it charge, so you are dealing a lot more damage because it's a massive increase, but you don't have to, especially if you're just doing calyxes. You can just get the hit off with the regular first charge ult, and it usually sweeps a lot of those smaller adds. Now with the bigger hit, it's going to consume 180 energy and deals, once again, physical damage equal to 252% of Argenti's attack to all enemies. On top of that, it's going to further deal damage for 6 extra times, with each time dealing physical damage equal to 86% of Argenti's attack to a random enemy. Now, once again, this is assuming that that skill is level 8. Quickly looking over Argenti's talents, the first one is Sublime Object. This just states that for every enemy hit when Argenti uses his basic attack, skill, or ultimate, he's going to regenerate 3 energy and grant himself a stack of Apotheosis, increasing his crit rate by 2.1% when this talent is level 8. Keep in mind this effect can stack up to 10 times, so if you're getting about 2% crit rate for each stack, with 10 stacks, you're getting 20% crit rate, roughly. So with all that said, Vixen, what are some of your initial thoughts when looking at a character like Argenti?
Well, actually taking a peek at both of these characters, obviously considering they are both going to be extremely heavily focused into hitting multiple targets at once. So obviously you're looking at the erudition here and you're trying to make sure that you're really looking for boss clears with multiple enemies, trying to do a lot of stuff, obviously looking to later ends of the simulated universe, divergent universe now, and all these other things. So at this point in time, looking at both these characters, obviously I think there's been a lot of scared thoughts with looking at Jade. I think a lot of people had a little bit higher hopes of maybe her personal damage or maybe supportive ability if she was going to do one of the two, but it seems like she kind of dipped into both baskets and doesn't necessarily do one better than the other. And once again, this just kind of goes into the whole follow-up as being a little bit maybe behind in terms of meta. With this team, it's a little bit difficult to look at Jade and try to force, yourself to look at, going after her a little bit more. So she does a lot of attacks, she does a lot of stat sticks, but it seems like it's going to be taking like a little bit more time in the fight to basically get her to her full potential. So she can do a lot of damage, but it's basically the longer the fight goes on, the better she does. Argenti, on the other hand, is basically just all about, just smacking things extremely hard. And obviously looking at his boss being one of the most difficult bosses in the game next to, things like Kafka and whatnot, it's obviously going to be something that we are kind of, looking forward to, as a character in general. People who have him obviously, extremely love him. I know that you have him, Rift. So, I think in general, he's an extremely good character, and I think he's got a lot going for him, especially the increases to crit rate, as well as just the extreme high amounts of attack damage that he can just put out. Never mind actually giving himself energy in multiple different instances in his kit, obviously going back to focusing on that ultimate.
Losing the 50-50 is the worst feeling in Genshin. And I understand, believe me. That's why whenever I have nothing left and am in the dilemma of whether or not to spend, I use Loot Bar. Loot Bar is 100% safe and only requires your Genshin UID to purchase Genesis crystals. Normally, the price for me to buy 6,480 crystals is $100, but you can see here how Loot Bar has reduced the price to about $85, and if you're a new user, you get an additional 5% off. The way it works is that Loot Bar tops up your account through the official channel with Hoyoverse. After making a purchase, you can expect to receive it in 30 minutes or less. In my case, I received mine in just about 5 minutes. Another comforting thing about Loot Bar is that they are trustworthy and offer 24/7 live support. Other creators like Dukaja, Jello Impact, Superatom, Mujin, and Tevat Times have endorsed and used this product themselves, including both Vixen and myself. Just use the link in the description to get another discount on top of the already cheaper prices at purchase. Thank you Loot Bar for sponsoring today's video, and now, let's dive in.
Now we're going to be taking a look at the light cone banners. Now looking at the light cones, first and foremost looking at Jade's light cone, yet Hope is Priceless. So looking at this, the ability on it states that it increases the wearer's crit rate by 16%, which already helps considering she does a lot of personal crit damage increases in her kit. While the wearer is in battle, for every 20% crit damage that exceeds 120%, the damage dealt by follow-up attack increases by 12%. This effect can stack up to 4 times, and when the battle starts or after the wearer uses their basic attack, it enables the ultimate or the damage dealt by follow-up attack to ignore 20% of the target's defense, lasting for 2 turns. So obviously we can see here, never mind just the great amount of focus into crit rate, and then obviously turning crit damage that's exceeding over that 120%, turning it into more damage for your follow-up attacks. This is going to be extremely good for Jade, and obviously I think this is going to be a lot easier for people to swallow, maybe to actually use her as a character, is to have her weapon to make her a little bit more comfortable. But looking at, in general, other characters that it could be really good for, it's a little difficult to kind of look at it because you don't really have too many other characters that are focused so heavily on follow-up attacks. The only one that I can actually think of consistently would be either Himiko or Herta. So using this here could be good to an extent, for these other characters. But when we look at light cones and Star Rail, it's always focusing on getting the light cone for the 5-star character that it's for. It's usually not for other things like that. But, technically, if you're focusing a lot on personal crit damage and whatnot on your Himiko or your Herta, technically this weapon could be good for you because it does help a lot with those follow-up attacks, doing extra damage based on your crit, and then also enhancing the damage from the ultimate or the just damage dealt by follow-up attacks when you actually use your basic attack, which obviously is going to be extremely good for Jade. It just depends on what you're doing for the other characters in the erudition slots. Another character that could actually use Jade's light cone is Jing Yuan, considering he does actually have something special in his kit that does do and focuses on follow-up attacks as well, so that's just another character that you could slot in. I don't know, Rift, about maybe you, if you could think of any other characters that this could be actually good on, what are your thoughts?
Well, like you said, I tend to agree with the fact or the statement that the weapons or the light cones are typically very heavily designed for their corresponding characters. And it's not that they can't be used for other scenarios, but certain of them are very, very niche to only working on their characters. And this light cone, Jade's light cone, is very powerful, giving you that crit rate, the ignoring defense and stuff like that. So I think it could definitely be used on some others that you already mentioned. But looking at Argenti's light cone, this increases the wearer's crit damage by 36%, which we know is going to be very good just because Argenti, in his own trace in his kit, he gives himself a lot of crit rate with those apotheosis stacks. Now, when the wearer uses ultimate, increases the wearer's ultimate damage based on their max energy. Each point of energy increases the ultimate damage by 0.36% up to 180 points of energy. Now, obviously, this is his light cone. It's going to be very good for him. And with having technically 2 ultimates, his max energy is 180, which is exactly as stated in the light cone's description. You're getting max damage up to 180 points of energy. To my knowledge, there's no other character that has that much energy at the max. Kind of like Raiden in Genshin Impact or even Yaimiko. They're one of only a few characters who actually have 90 energy costs, whereas most characters at the maximum only go up to 80. So this light cone can be very, very good for Argenti. Now, you could use this on other characters that do have a high energy. They are going to be getting a lot of that ultimate damage, as well as the crit damage you are getting. Now, just in general, looking at some other light cones, there is Eternal Calculus, which is that new erudition light cone from Simulated Universe. And it's a great free-to-play option if you're not looking to get any of the light cones for Jade or Argenti. And considering that they're both erudition characters, I think it's good timing, that having this new light cone in Simulated Universe. If you are looking to get one of these characters, you already have a solid option. It's really just a bunch of stat increases. You're getting like 8% attack flat off, and then you're also, as you hit multiple enemies, you're increasing your attack by more, and that can stack. And then if you're hitting a lot of enemies, again, you're increasing your speed. So a really good option just for some stat bonuses. And then when looking at like a lot of the 4-star light cones, most of the 4-star erudition light cones are pretty good across the board. With some of them, maybe not so, but you can use a lot of those options as well.
Now we're going to go into our summary section where we talk about questions and then jumping over into looking at, is the character good at E0, or are Eidolons something to actually be worth looking into in a heavy sense, or do they heavily focus on really wanting one of their Eidolons? So first and foremost, the first question we have is, do you need either character on your account? Basically, how valuable is this character? Now, when looking at both these characters, personally for me, I'm looking at how good are they and necessary are they right now. If we're looking in terms of technically what you would call quote-unquote meta, you would probably want actually a Nihility character if you really want the quote-unquote best, quote-unquote, once again, erudition character type is Acheron. Now, she is labeled as a Nihility character, but she acts basically as an erudition character. And if you want quote-unquote the best what you could have right now, in my personal opinion, Acheron's going to be there. But I think, if anything, Argenti is going to be a close second. Argenti does a bunch of damage and is extremely good right now. And I think in general, when looking at these types of characters, Argenti's a good pull if you're looking for someone to do a bunch of damage to multiple enemies all at once. So great for bosses and great for Calyxes and whatnot as well. Looking at Jade though, on the other hand, Jade's a little bit more difficult to kind of slot in teams. With her whole deck collector thing, dropping HP and increasing their speed while doing some other things, actually, if you think about it, she's helping just basically do a little bit more personal damage. She's kind of actually acting like a parasite to an extent. She, makes somebody else or herself a deck collector and takes away HP, gives them speed, and then at the same time is basically helping herself when they do attacks to do more personal damage for herself with her follow-up attacks. So she's going to be pretty good for characters that maybe even some destruction characters, maybe making them, some deck collectors. And, the first one that comes to mind that's the best is actually Blade. So when pairing that together, maybe that's a good idea. But, when looking at Jade, it's kind of these specific instances that you kind of have to actually think about to kind of force her into certain areas. And so I think that could be a little bit of a difference when you're actually looking at, should I pull Jade or not, is looking at your account, do I actually have somebody to pair with Jade?
Diving right into our next question, we ask, what kinds of teams are you trying to build? And actually, Vixen, you kind of touched on this a little bit already, but I think it's great that you brought up Blade because it looks like Blade and Jade have a lot of good synergies that a lot of people have been talking about, and I would agree with it. And then there's also Jingliu, just because of her reducing a little bit of HP. Jade can do the same thing. So if you do have characters like Blade or Jing Liu, I think there are options for you to just kind of slot in Jade to teams like that, just to be a second damage dealer in the team, just kind of to help out as more supportive damage, because she is pretty selfish. You could do things like Blade and Jade and then have a support and then your sustain. You could do the same thing, just replace Blade with Jing Liu. You kind of throw them around based on what kind of break effects you need for the opponents you're facing, right? But then there's also things like people talk about doing IPC teams where you have Topaz, you have Aventurine as your sustain. And Topaz is a good damage dealer. I think personally she's the best at the niche of follow-up. A lot of the times I don't think it's the character's fault, it's just that follow-up is in a bad state right now and needs some work. And so that could be debatable among some people's minds, but I think most of us can agree with that. It's just follow-up just isn't the meta and it's not the choice you go for. But if you put Jade with Topaz, I think there's a lot of synergy there as well in an alternate kind of team, just because Topaz is increasing follow-up damage across the entire party, so she just works well with other follow-up attack type units. And then obviously with Aventurine having follow-up attacks in his kit, same thing there, and it has good damage, but he's also your sustain for the team, and then you could still slot in a really good Harmony character or a Nihility character if you wanted to, just to support all that damage.
I totally agree, actually. You're talking about like Jade, Jing Liu, and Blade is a really good comp together, and then, you know, throwing in just a really good healer because you're losing so much HP in that team. You know, Jade's decreasing HP, Jing Liu's doing the same, Blade is hurting himself at the same time. You're going to kind of need someone to kind of make sure that if you are getting hit, it's either an extremely good healer or, you know, someone like Fujuan or whatever to kind of be a little bit of a defense kind of person for you. Now, looking at another person, actually, recently we just got a character, Firefly. Now, Firefly does actually decrease her HP as well. And so I'm almost wondering if, just in general, destruction characters could be good for this idea. But I do totally agree with the idea that, you know, she's going to be really, really good for other follow-up characters. And I'm really excited to actually see how that can work, especially considering someone like Blade is a destruction unit that hurts himself and then can actually make use of that HP decrease, as well as he goes into follow-up attacks as well. So it's just a really great synergy that you were talking about there. The next question we talk about is, do you need the light cones? Now, Rift already talked about a particular 5-star that is named Eternal Calculus that is an extremely good light cone for both of these characters. It's not going to necessarily be, you know, as good as their own personal light cones, but if you are kind of just wanting the character and, you know, focusing on getting characters, you don't care too much about getting the light cones for each character, I think, like Rift was talking about, this is going to be an easier to get light cone, as well as it's going to be pretty good for both of them. So that might tend to push the idea of, do you actually need either one of these light cones? And as you talk about, you know, both of these light cones, obviously, like normal, in Star Rail, it's different than Genshin. Genshin, some weapons can be swapped around pretty easily with some other characters. But with both of these light cones, because it is Star Rail, the light cones are very specific to the specific character that they're for. So I think in general, these light cones are extremely good, but I think Rift brought an amazing point talking about the actual 5-star light cone earlier that is going to be good for them. So it actually takes some pressure off if you want to get them, and you don't have to worry about actually getting the light cone with both of them.
Now let's take a look at Jade and Argenti's Eidolons and really determine, are these even worth going for in the first place? Really hyper-focusing on the E1 and the E2. So starting out with Jade, her E1 just states that the follow-up attack damage from her talent is going to increase by 32%. And after the Debt Collector character attacks and the number of enemy targets hit is either 2 or 1, then Jade will additionally gain 1 or 2 points of charge respectively. So if you hit 2 enemies, you're getting 1 extra point, and if you hit just 1 enemy, you're going to get 2 extra points of that charge for her talent hit. Now her E2 is just stating that you're getting like 18% crit rate when you have 15 stacks of pawned asset. So both constellations are very good and good for damage increases for your Jade, but I would say that they're not too necessary because it's not like really changing how you play her. It's not like something crazy and game changing. I think between the two, personally, the E1 is got good value because you are increasing that follow-up attack damage, and on top of it, you're increasing how fast you can actually get it back. So she will be using it a little bit more often now with the E1. And if you really are suffering for crit rate, the E2 will feel good. But if you have E1 or just staying at E0, if you use a crit rate body piece, you should be fine on crit rate, just because also if you have her light cone, you're getting 16% there as well. Looking at Argenti, his E1 states that each stack of Apotheosis additionally increases crit damage by 4%. We know he already gives himself crit rate, about 2% crit rate if you're leveling that talent, and he has 10 stacks, so you're going to get 20% crit rate already, and then you're going to be getting 40% crit damage roughly when you have the E1. So it's a nice damage increase. But then looking at the E2, you have, if the number of enemies on the field equals 3 or more, when the ultimate's used, your attack's going to increase by 40% for just one turn. This is also a nice little damage increase. And when looking at both of these, again, I tend to gravitate to just the E1, or really just none at all. I think you can be just fine not having either one and just staying at E0. And once again, I do gravitate towards that first E1 just because of the crit damage increase. That's going to happen naturally because you already want to have those apotheosis stacks going on for the crit rate. E2 is not bad either. I just think that if you have good team builds and you've already built some characters, your harmony characters or just other sources in generals like Lightcones are already going to be giving you a lot of attack increase. So it could be argued that you're hitting diminishing returns with the 40% increased attack, but it still is good nonetheless, just because Argenti's focus is a lot of his ultimate damage.
We hope that this video could help you decide on whether these characters or Lightcones coming up on the next banner are for you. As always, if you have any suggestions that may help other players, go ahead and let us know down in the comments. Make sure to like, subscribe, and check out our Discord as well. Thank you again for watching the video, and we'll see you in the next one.